Okay, so there are three things that every business needs to be successful. It needs to have a problem that they're solving, they need a person that they're solving it for, and they need to be doing it in a way that it adds value in a way that no other business in the space can do. This is the perennial problem for any business anywhere. As I've been figuring out how to potentially launch a startup in the health tech space, I want to talk about how I'm approaching those three pieces of starting a business and how I think I may have cracked that code. Get after it. Get after it. Light that fire. Okay, so we know we need to do three different things. We know we have a problem that we need to solve, we have a person that we need to solve it for, and we need to do it in a way that adds value. So let's look at it this way. We have a problem plus a person plus value. Now, there's quite a bit more to it that goes into it than this, but this is pretty much the thing. Now, when we have a problem, we know we need something, we know we need to do something for someone. There is a particular thing that they're having trouble doing, there is something that they don't know how to do, something along those lines. That problem is key and critical to what we're doing. Now, there's also a person. You can't just solve, it's not just enough to solve a problem, you have to do it for someone. And you have to do it for someone in such a way that they're willing to pay for it. So not only does it have to be solved for that person, it has to be solved in a way that they can afford and are willing to part with money that they have to solve that problem. Now, the last thing here is value, and the value is essentially the unique way in which you're solving the problem for that person. Perhaps you have better technology, perhaps you have faster technology, maybe it's a stronger product, maybe it lasts longer, maybe it makes the person feel a certain way, and that's why they want and why they are trying to buy it. All of those things could be the value. Now, what's important here is the value is connected to the problem, and the problem is connected to the person. So the person is at the center here. The person is in the center, is at the core of this challenge. Now, depending on the type of business, there are two types of businesses that we can be. We could be a B2B, business to business, or we could be B2C. That's a G, that looks like a G. We could be B2C. And in that case, we are selling directly to a customer, a business to a customer. The customer or the consumer is paying for the product itself. Now, in the healthcare space, we are primarily in a B2B type of space. What the project that I've been working on with Healthcare OS is a B2B type product. In other words, the person is actually two potential people. There is the user of the product, the person who has to essentially use it on a daily basis, and there is also the buyer, the person who actually decides, yes, we're going to make this buying decision. Now, the closer that these two people are to each other, the easier a B2B sale can be, particularly if, like me, part of your value proposition, the thing that you're doing uniquely is a design, efficiency, or user experience type of value. Healthcare OS, the project that I've been working on for several years now, is primarily at this point pitched as a user experience and efficiency type of product. It helps someone be more efficient. It helps them do their job better. Now, in a healthcare organization, the user often, especially in a larger organization, the user is going to be someone who is a physician, a nurse, a MA, a PA, something along those lines, maybe front desk staff, whatever that looks like, if that's a nursing staff or just some other administrative staff. And the buyer, particularly when you get into very large health organizations like IDNs, integrated delivery networks, hospital systems, things like that, that's usually a C-suite person. That's somebody who's really super disconnected from the day to day. Now, the challenge particularly for Healthcare OS and for most health tech products that are trying to make their way into the market, is that the B2C is often the easier route to sell into. It's easier to convince a physician to buy a new EMR because it's going to be easier for them. They know the pain points that they struggle with in terms of design and user experience. Now on the B2B front, that buyer often has a completely different set of wants and needs. They're looking at the cost of the technology, how much the money the technology can save them, or alternatively, particularly this is the best case scenario, if it can make them more money. And that buyer often has a very different perspective than the user. So in the B2C market, we're looking at, it would be ideal to sell to a physician. In the B2B market, we're stuck selling to someone who is not experiencing those pain points, at least in my situation. Okay, so we know kind of the problem here. We're trying to sell a product that is very much the problem space, and kind of the value is a design and user experience value. Now that value is felt by the customer, the physician, or the user in a B2B type space. The problem is, at least for most healthcare organizations and with most electronic health records and medical records, the buyer does not have the same needs. Even though, and this is supported by data, but is a little fuzzy in terms of actually like connecting the data, even though the user experience and design gains in an EMR could directly have benefits to things like efficiency, effectiveness, saving money, making money, things like that inside a larger healthcare organization. Those are the things that buyer persona really cares about. The problem is it's really hard to sell someone on that, and it's doubly so when in the last 10 years, many healthcare organizations, healthcare executives have spent a ton of money migrating. They're not really interested in spending more money migrating to a new system or taking a risk on a new system when they know what they're getting with their current system is working at a minimum. A physician who spends an extra 2 hours a day doing documentation because of their current EMR isn't really going to have the impact on the C-suite that they might if they were in an independent or solo practice. This is why I have thought about, for Healthcare OS, actually launching this for solo practice. Independent practices, private practice physicians, those physicians who are connected to those user experience issues much more closely in their EMR than, and they also have the buying persona. They are the buying persona, essentially. They are the buyer and they are the user. The biggest problem with that is that private practices are evaporating. More and more physicians are leaving private practice, more and more physicians are selling private practice, and more physicians who are graduating are not going into private practice. So we have this problem then that the easiest way to bring a product like this, or at least I do, the problem for me is that I could bring this product to market with great user experience, great design, and has a potential, and as I've found, a lot of people really like it, but then it has no customer. It has no place to go because the customers that it would be for are disappearing, and the customers that might actually get the most benefit in larger hospitals are too disconnected and don't have the incentive to actually use a new system. So we're kind of stuck. Where do we go? What do we do? So we have a person, we have a problem, and we have value. And that value part is there. We know, like, this is a well-designed product, or has the potential to be much easier to use than a lot of other products. All of this still has to be proven, but assuming that design process and all that can be proven, then we know that that's the focus and that's a unique value driver. But the commercial benefit, or the way in which someone is going to pay for this, is still a little fuzzy. It's still a little bit up in the air. How is that going to work? Why would someone buy this product? Well, this past week I was reading about what I talked about last week, which was actually value-based care. I was continuing to do research into that, and I stumbled upon some really interesting data. If you haven't seen last week's video on what value-based care is, to give you a really brief synopsis, value-based care is a way of reimbursement for physicians or hospitals or whatever, healthcare organizations that focuses on value delivered over time, the outcome essentially of healthcare services, rather than what the actual services were. So in a traditional model, fee-for-service model, we're looking at a menu of services that a physician will essentially do over the course of a single visit. In a value-based care model, we're not so concerned with that. Why or how, I'm not entirely sure, but we're not so much concerned with that. We're actually concerned with the outcome. Now, there's some really interesting things I want to talk about here in just a second with as it relates to value-based care, particularly when it comes to implementing value-based care. But the thing that I found really interesting is that because the market is now moving to value-based care, the U.S. government Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has incentivized value-based care. There's actually this need for these new value-based care tools. These are generally seen as population health management tools. It's kind of the PHMs, or the kind of the overview name for them. And these are essentially metrics and reporting tools. So one of the things that this places a big emphasis on is making sure that at the end of the year, when it's time to renew contracts and renew I guess it's just contracts actually that get renewed, it's important to be able to see metrics and be able to understand what those metrics were, and did this practice, did these physicians, did this care team actually meet those metrics. So EHRs now have to, again, kind of do another thing. They need to be able to do these population health management type tasks. And that's the way that now in a value-based care organization that the organization gets paid. But here's the interesting thing. There was a online survey done. This was done in 2018. So this is a few years old, but I would imagine it's still roughly pretty relevant. They did a survey of healthcare executives. 87% were C-suite executives. And they found that 2/3 had found that their EHRs were not delivering better population health management tools. What exactly that means, still have to figure that out, but that is essentially this. We can roughly see that as like these metrics and reporting tools for population health to make sure your value-based care model is working. And half claim that they would be willing to switch EHRs. So if we think back to our buyer and user persona under a B2B business or sales model, we're now having a more closely aligned incentive between the buyer, these C-suite executives, and the user or the physicians in the system, in that switching an EHR would give them better population management tools, more effectiveness and efficiency over the long period of time, which is now incentivized and rewarded under this model. To me, and this is kind of the first time I've actually seen these two incentives, values, these needs, that's the word. It's the first time I've seen these needs more closely align since I've started working on this, which is ironic since I started working on this in 2017. This article is from 2018, so it probably should have been something I found earlier, but we will move on beyond that right now. Now, this is really interesting to me. This is really promising. Because at the end of the day, what this means is now we're getting more close alignment in these values and these needs and these problems that these people, users and buyers have within this organization. Now, this is only one part of this problem. The other part, and this is something that I think I'm going to get into more in another video, is about implementing value-based care. And there's something really, really interesting, in my opinion, about the alignment between what value-based care purports to be and how I think independent physicians actually want to operate. And I think there's an opportunity there as well. I'm not going to get into that right now. This video's gone on long enough. But I find that there's something really promising here. For the first time since I've started this, I actually see some alignment in incentives and needs and problems between the users and the buyers in these organizations. Now, it's 50% of an 87% of the survey. So it's 50% of the 100 people in this survey. So it's 50 people-ish in this one survey that was done 4 years ago. So there's very high likelihood that this information has changed, or that most of these systems have implemented better tools. But the reality is that there is now a definite incentive and alignment between the needs of efficiency, effectiveness, and management and metrics, and the user needs of efficiency, good user experience that promotes effective care and efficient care, and learns and helps a provider provide care over time. And those are some of the things that I've talked about with Healthcare OS, the things that I want to see Healthcare OS be. And I think that's really promising. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that this helps to add value to you. I find it really fun to make these videos. If you haven't, please subscribe to my channel. This is where all these updates will be coming out on. And you can like the video, share it if that's what you're into. And I will see you all real soon. Thanks for watching.